Welcome to our play shop about education reform. And we are here with Suzanne, Amber, and me, Lee. And we are going to start with how we usually start our meetings whenever we meet is with a verse from Suzanne. So would you like to share?
Yes, of course. Welcome, everyone. I'm a trained Waldorf teacher of 27 years, and even though I exited all of the systems, including the Waldorf system, I still work deeply with Rudolf Steiner's work and his indications, and this verse comes from Rudolf Steiner. May there reign here spirit, strength, and love. May there shine here spirit, light, and goodness, born from certainty of heart and from steadfastness of soul, so that we may bring to young human beings bodily strength for work, inwardness of soul, and clarity of spirit. May this place be consecrated to such a task. May young minds and hearts here find servers of the light, endowed with strength, who will guard and cherish them. And I will give you a
Thank
quick,
you.
you're welcome. I'll give you a little bio. I have been a Waldorf teacher all through my adult kids' growing years, from preschool to 12th grade and then into administration, and then left all of it behind to begin a fresh new start with multidimensional disciplines, including Waldorf, but not limited to that, and explored Montessori and the Finnish forest schools and place-based learning and many different modalities, and incorporated them into what I do now, which is help launch learning centers. So the families that come together with a common goal and a common vision are the lighthouses that make up our new earth programs in education. They're not schools, they're unschools, they're pod schools, they're not schools at all. They're whatever you want them to be. So you can dream into your vision with us, helping you steer and craft and curate your perfect scenario for your community. Welcome to our webinar.
Beautiful, Suzanne. So I will give a little bio of myself. I am a longtime educator in alternative environments, primarily outdoor education, but also I've taught at community colleges and at elementary schools and high schools. And I opened my own alternative education program that started off as a homeschool cooperative in 2011, and that was for primarily initiated for my children, and I have three of them. But it expanded because I wanted to have a social environment for my children to include many different families, and uh, it came as an initiative to support an alternative learning environment that was primarily outside and in a farm-based program. So I worked from there and created a also high school level program that was for displaced or kids that weren't allowed to participate in the normal school system because they had been kicked out. And so it was an alternative program for them to be re-engaged with learning when they had basically decided that education wasn't for them. And it was wildly successful and very wonderful. We had lots of engagement between different parts of our community, and we did lots of service projects and had kids actually working in many different mentors within our community. And that's my big passion, is to be able to work with the community that you have and the people that are there and find out what kind of program that you need to be able to fit in the niches that aren't being served, that are being many children that are being dropped by the system. And we are seeing that now as a mass exodus of people realizing, waking up, oh, my kids actually aren't being served by the current paradigm. So that's how I came to be here and working with Suzanne and Amber, because we have a very similar passions and perspectives about how to work with system reform with education.
Hello, I'm Amber, and I help with the side for of things for structure and creating the intention to from which people can join and from which projects and different ways to relate together can flourish. I am I help with the PMA side of things, and I also have created a program here. We had a homeschool pod, and I have learned some of the things to do that, well, I had started a learning center and then it didn't fully start. And so I learned some things not to do and looking to bring community together in a different way for skill sharing within the community here on our land and elsewhere, and have a network of classes that could be extracurricular as well as another homeschool pod. I'm open to that. So I'm curious to see what the future holds in that area. With our course, part of what I help with is the business plans, the finance plans, and the governance structures. So those are the areas that I'm helping lead, and that's part of my expertise as a PMA. I worked with private member associations and ministries and education associations that are have the religious basis and also ones that are association basis. That's my role.
It was so wonderful to find Amber while I was working away the last 10 years building these learning centers and alternatives to public school and private school, as well as free schools and tuition based or fee paying schools or not schools. So there's a broad spectrum of possibilities from preschool to high school that I've dabbled in and also manifested real lasting change in certain communities across Canada and the US. I've opened programs in British Columbia and in Ontario and in Oregon and here in Washington. This is where my concentrated efforts have been in the last 10 years. So when meeting Amber, all of the problems of registering business, having to deal with government oversight, and having that whole side of the business was removed. And the relief that I felt knowing that I could work at what I love to do with children and families in a protected way without the government interventions was the biggest peace of mind and the biggest takeaway. And that's why I jumped on board with these two ladies to continue my work in the private domain. So that's one of our focal points. I don't see a lot of people out there that are starting learning centers doing that. And that sets us apart from many other practitioners of education reform. I think that's a really good place for us to start the conversation because you probably all know we don't know enough about what our rights are to be able to assert them. And if we start with that, we can go into this question of education reform. Because if we didn't need to reform it, it would have been all in our hands the whole time, but it's been taken out of our hands and put into an industrial model. And that's been happening for several generations now. So if you think back far enough, children were educated in whatever trade or family environment that they found themselves in, their family constellations, and the communities would also rally around children to educate them together. So I know about this a little bit from a different point of view because my dad's family's Amish and they left the Amish community. But I've been there into the Amish villages in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and upstate New York, where I saw this is still true from that era that's carried over. The children only go to school till 8th grade and they learn all the basic things that they need to know, no filler, and then they get out and they work with their families, with their communities, and they are skills based. And I think that that model could still be recovered and reclaimed in some way because the days that children are spending in the classroom, especially now with some pretty interesting curriculum adjustments, I won't say too much, I'll leave Lee to talk about that. People are waking up noticing that public school is a funnel of information that they didn't agree to. And that is changing and transforming the way we think about education and the status of education. And people are leaving the public schools, pulling their children out at record rates. We've never seen anything like this before. So it could be the end of the industrial education revolution. It could be the beginning of free choice. And we would like to be at the forefront of that wave. All right, so here's a little bit about what we want to share with you today. In a nutshell, why does education need reform? Lee's going to talk a little bit more about that, and we'll give you some references and examples, but we can also share in the next newsletter that goes out links from today's call that'll help you do some research and go down your own rabbit holes, because we don't have time today to really unpack this in a big way. Like, what does the Rockefeller Foundation have to do with my learning plans? A lot, actually. Just like it has to do with the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of things that are going on politically are funded by these long running wealth organizations like the Rockefeller Foundation. So this all started in 1933 under Roosevelt, and gold was confiscated and people lost their wealth. And alongside that, with the collapse of the economy, was a reset. Now we're in another one. We're on the forefront of another reset. It looks different than it did the last time, but with it comes all the same change. So the more you go back in history, you will see that these resets are their century cycles, and we're in for one right now. So education is ready for a reset. We want to stay on the positive end of this wave of reset. We don't want to get bogged down by all the negative, fear-based, fear-mongering stuff. We want to just take ourselves out of the way and watch it go by at a safe distance. And that's what we're building. We're building those safe structures outside of what's happening in the world that you can rely on. These structures that are in your Constitution, that are in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for the Canadians and all the global people out there, you have these rights, and it lives in the private domain. So I don't want to get too deep into that either, because that's Amber's specialty. But I know that what I'm doing is getting all these little seed pods planted and then getting out of the way of that big wave of whatever we want to call it, anything. It's a wave of weirdness, and we'll stay out of its way and let it go by and help the people that are falling off of that train get themselves back on their feet into the new earth revolution, evolution.
Yeah, I wanted to say is that before we started, Peggy, you shared about this sense, this feeling of there's something wrong here, not really knowing maybe intellectually what to put your finger on. And really the foundation of our current educational model was started from the Prussian system, which was an industrialized model. That's why we call it that. It was to create good workers for the Industrial Revolution. That was a revolution that happened in the 1800s, and it served its purpose. And now we are at the end of the industrialized revolution. We are in the technological revolution now, and it is creating a democratic flattening of access to information. And so we all are getting information about what it is, why it is that we've created it like this. We are seeing the impacts of it on our children's bodies, on our children's minds. And this is what this is referencing to the embodiment of our educational experiences. We're seeing it within ourselves. We've been trained oftentimes to be consumers of information and regurgitate it back for the purpose of the industrialized model. And that doesn't feel good, because it's not actually serving us. It's serving a system outside of us that isn't life-based. It's consumerist-based. It's closed loop system. So they just want to keep you within this model of consumerism. And it's not good or bad. It definitely the Prussian model helped move us out of a lot of things that people were having issues with at the time, but it's no longer serving us and it's causing more harm than good now. And we recognize that. We're seeing huge increases in pharmaceutical drugs being used within children and within adults, and everyone's stressed and everyone's overwhelmed with the amount of things that are coming at us, and it doesn't feel like it's actually serving our souls and our spirit and our community. We see it all the time. It's isolating everyone. It's making it so that we don't have the capacity or even the like energetic, the spoons to be able to exchange with one another in a really holistic, compassionate way. We just got to shut down, go in front of the TV, check out. It's really, really destructive for our internalized systems. And I think that that's what everyone after the pandemic, during the pandemic, we had that time to kind of like reset. Like, oh, what is it that I'm actually spending all my time in? What is it that I'm actually having my kids spend all their time in? Because a lot of the time that is spent within the current educational model is serving the system to get the system to keep going, but not actually serving the individualized child or the family. So or the land or the environment. It's just constant reframing of what is important to serve the industrialized model. So there's a solution. It's outside the system. It's actually a very old model. The thing that we are helping to create, these community-based education, like just like Suzanne was talking about, the Amish have been doing it for a long time. Indigenous people have been doing it a long time. These community-based education pods, nests, villages, this is a model that has existed far longer than any other educational system. And we are just here to remind ourselves and remind each other that there's another way possible. And here are the ways to create the protection, because we're still in an industrialized system and they still want us to not participate in those community-based models. It's not necessarily planned by everyone, but we've all been programmed because most of us have been in the traditional school model. And so it's really hard to recognize, oh, this is something that isn't actually serving my community or myself. And we're here to say, oh, there's a different way, and we can help create that with these protections so that when you get interacting with all these different regulations or all of these different judgments from other people of like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you're not going to be able to make any money, or your kids aren't going to be able to find a job, or your kids aren't going to be socialized, all these like pulling apart at your own sense of this is what's right. There's answers to it, and there's community for it. So
what we have to start with for everyone is the crisis point. When there's a crisis, then there can be change. If everybody's so comfortable, why would they change? But you have to come to crisis before you can really want to take matters into your own hands and become responsible for outcomes. Our culture has purposefully been guiding us to become more lazy, more apathetic, just generally dismissive of each other. And so the power of connection and reconnection and remembering our way home is how we're going to turn the tide against that force it's a force of darkness that we're up against, and it's a mighty force. But there is power in numbers, and there is more light than you would ever imagine once we start getting our lighthouses all lit up. That is an internal experience that all three of us have gone through together and separately. And our lights went on, and then we would find another one. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. And then that light would go on, and then everything just got brighter and brighter. And I have to say, when you find your core team, 3 is a really magical number. And Amber and I were working quite steadily along for a year, just kind of playing ping pong with our ideas. We hadn't manifested anything. Then Lee came in, and suddenly we had this lighthouse triangle, and it has been amazing. And I want you to know, those of you that are watching this, what we are doing for you and for everyone that comes into contact with us as a practice, as a devotional practice, is we get up at 6 in the morning every day and we meet on Zoom and we work on this work. How can we make it better? What do we need to refine? What are the tasks to get the information out? Who built the last post on Instagram? Who's working on the email list? It goes on and on, from the practical to the spiritual. We do the whole scope. And at the end of each meeting, we feel that the needle has moved just a little bit further along. And that's because people are asking for help. The crisis is coming. People are waking into what is happening around me, what is happening to my child. And once the children started being impacted by so much of the digital effects, whether it's the curriculum content, if you don't agree with SOGI 1, 2, 3, for example, there's another option. Even if you're a single parent, even if you're low income, you can build this. This is not limited to people with vast, endless amounts of wealth that can just stay home with their kids and play with them all the time. I know personally, it's possible to do it alone, to start, and then you build your community around your initiative because the lighthouses will get lit. So once someone says, what is happening to my child? You have to ask the question, do you want your child and your legacy, what you leave behind when you leave Earth, when you're all gone and there's no one left to remember you? What do you want? Do you want them to participate in this industrial model? Do you want them to stay the course that the last 3 generations have been programmed to do? Or do you want them to get out of that worker bee matrix mindset? So I think when it's placed that way, when that question comes, the resounding answer is yes, I want out. I want something better. I want something more. I want to leave something good behind. That is our human nature. We're designed to leave a legacy. We're designed to be in the positive, radiant frequencies. We are not designed to be part of a dark agenda. We are designed to resonate with each other in humanness. And that's as simple as it is. So if you go with that, and you can open up a whole world of support and connection and deliver your vision, and others are just going to come right on board because it's going to speak to their soul. So I work very much in the Waldorf pedagogy. I don't even want to call it Waldorf anymore because it has become an elite branded, I have to be careful what I say, an elite and branded trademarked form of education that mirrors the industrial model. Drop your child off at 8:30, you pick them up at 3, and there's after school programs, and they all cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you too can come out with all these pretty books in your classroom child's experience. So that is part of it. That's only part of it, what Waldorf education has become, but what it started as was a very grassroots and homeschool adaptable model. So I use the modality because it is soul food, the way the curriculum is delivered. If you have a teacher, a guide, or a mentor that is willing and able to study how to deliver the soul food in the classroom instead of the rote learning, that's the biggest difference. And there are other systems like Reggio Emilia. There is community-based. Montessori is practical-based, just to keep it really simple. Forest School is nature-based. These are all great modalities. You can mix and match to a degree where you find the common ground for those curriculums. We'll talk about that more in the course. If you haven't signed up for our course yet, you're going to love it because it's all this stuff, but over many, 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 many weeks. I'm not going to tell you all about that yet. So do you want your child to become a worker bee? No. All right, so what can you do? we have lots of things we can do about it, but I would like, Lee, could you share what we discovered as the magic trio, not just ourselves being the magic trio, but the magic trio for bringing all these different modalities of curriculum and pedagogy design and philosophies together. There's a vehicle for that. And once you tune into it, you can unschool your mind, observe your child being unschooled and deprogrammed, both of you at the same time, walking on this path together. And that's where the real magic is. It isn't about the beautiful handwriting or the math concepts. It's about the beautiful journey where you are symbiotic in your own family.
Absolutely. The healing that comes from the connection with your children or with children that you have in your care, the magic of teaching is that witnessing of the other, the child and the adult, witnessing one another and discovering together. And that's what every teacher I have ever talked to, every mentor, they identify that's why they teach. That it's not any other reason but that connection and that magic that happens when you've created that space. And what I have found in my years of teaching in an alternative education environment where I didn't have any kind of real curriculum that I had to adhere to, I was just following the children's lead. It was the 3 Ps. And Suzanne shared this with me, and I was like, yep, it's exactly right. So it's play-based learning, place-based learning, and project-based learning. And when you orient yourself and the child's interests around those 3 things, you will find that everything else just falls into place. The things that they need, they arise. The child will have a natural inclination because learning is inherent. We are born to learn, and it's not something that we need to teach a child how to do. They have a desirous, we don't have to teach kids how to walk. We don't have to. They already have the initiative, and they just need to practice it with some modeling, and then it happens. And that's in a loving environment. And so if you set up the environment so that it's optimal for learning, and then you have a loving mentor there to witness and to help guide if necessary, then it's play. They play with crawling, they play with walking, they play with numbers. Kids want to start counting things all the time. It can be a game and a fun thing. And so the other part of it is place, because we're all in a place. We're all from the land. We all experience the connection to land. We eat every single day, hopefully, if we're that lucky. And if and so that connection is there. And so it's a natural curiosity to be like, oh, what kinds of foods are here? What kind of animals are here? What kinds of people are here? And all the kind of learning that can come from that. It's naturally curiosity based because you're always experiencing it. And so structuring your lessons and your school around that is a natural extension of childhood curiosity. And so it becomes an easeful thing. And then the other one is project. So to create some structure, you can identify something that the child is interested in doing, or you are interested in doing, a project that it can also come from the initiative of the mentor, because when you have that connection with children, they will naturally want to follow you. And so you're saying, oh, here, I want to build a greenhouse. Well, how do we do that? And then we start figuring it out together, and all kinds of different lessons can emerge from that. And those types of education processes are what children remember. I went to a Montessori school, preschool, and I remember one of my formative educational experiences was starting a garden at my Montessori school. And I remember seeing the little pea and planting it in the ground and patting it and then watering it every day and watching it grow. It was just like the most magical thing. And that is a project, and that is also a place-based learning module. So that's the kinds of things that children absorb and they just love to experience. So that is something that happens within industrial modeled education, but it's often a huge fight to be able to do that kind of learning in a way that honors every individual child. And oftentimes, because of how massive the system is, kids get lost. And that's why community-based programs are so much more fruititious for the children and for the individuals, teachers, mentors who are conducting them, because people get lost in the system.
Can I tell you a little bit about the magic of storytelling?
Absolutely.
This is how I fell in love with Waldorf education almost 30 years ago. And my children that are now grown and gone, I have one left in the nest who's 12. So I'm now gearing up for the middle school adventure. Fortunately, I'm pretty primed by my 3 older ones to know what's coming. And it was storytelling. It was bringing stories alive. It was at a Christmas event on a farm, and the farmer was dressed up as St. Nicholas, and he was in the barn, and there were the cows and all the hay bales, and he was embodying this archetypal character, Father Christmas. And, you know, Waldorf education is Eurocentric. And that's one of the complaints that many people that are using the pedagogy now is, why would you celebrate Christmas in Fiji? It doesn't make any sense. Does Santa have a surfboard? No. So Waldorf, it really needs a whole overhaul, but because it's global now, how would Steiner have known that that was going to happen, that you were going to find that education form in China? You would find that education form in South Africa. It's everywhere. It's all over the world. So it needs a reboot. But in my culture, we are Eurocentric people. And so it resonated with me. And I brought my children, and they were awe and wonder. That's all it took, was awe and wonder for my child to witness this character and story come alive. And ever since then, I tapped into my inner storyteller, which I knew I had, but I hadn't really unlocked it. And I was in my early 20s when I had my children, and it was like so far beyond me. And I headed to the teacher training. I was like, I've got to figure this out, because my kids just got switched on and magic flows out of us. Why can't we keep this going every day? I didn't come to Waldorf education to be a teacher. I came to become a better parent. And it was in the storytelling modality of bringing things alive through stories. Concepts, math concepts can become alive through storytelling. Biographies of great people that have done wonderful or ill deeds in the world comes alive in storytelling. And so that is a vehicle that I use, combined with the 3 Ps, that is just bulletproof. You can't but want to do and know more when you have a mentor or a guide that's using these together. So it makes things mean more and gives them a sensible context. It gives children the opportunity to create inner pictures of their very own, rather than the cut and paste Disney stuff that they're fed. In the programming system, they're all supposed to know that Snow White looks like this Disney character, and they'll dress up like her for Halloween with a plastic outfit. No, Snow White is an archetype. And here's the story that goes with that archetype, that the old witch in the gingerbread house is an archetype, and there are more and more of them in the world. And when you go out in the world, you'll recognize them. And my son Charlie recognized there was a witch from the storybook in the co-op when he was 3 years old. He knew it was her, and he went right up to her and introduced himself, and you must be Baba Yaga. And she was fortunately a Russian woman, an older Russian woman. She had the thing, and she was the archetype, and she played right along with him because he entered the story, and she was there to meet him there. So this is where magic and community can happen. And we drove her home. She had her cane, her walking stick, and we drove her home. So the community building can come in concentric rings through the storytelling. I'm telling you the story right now. And it's engaging, and you may want to think, where have I met that in my life? Many times. When was I most enlivened and interested in what was happening around me was when there was a storyteller. This very morning, it's still Monday. It's still Monday. this morning, Lee and I hosted the Showcase Kids group, which is a meetup online for homeschool children in our little pod. We have different cohorts. This is our first one. There's another one forming in Alberta. And after the call today, we talked about geology and ghosts and the silver mines and all these things that the children wanted to talk about. Their inquiry led the flow of the conversation. And all we need to do is help them navigate, not talking over each other or interrupting, and making sure everyone has a turn. That's all we have to do now, because the conversation is just.
Oh, Suzanne.
I really wish you would stop talking so much, because Lee is such an amazing storyteller. She's just captivating. And I said, well, good, great. I will step back next week. Lee, you're up for next Monday to continue.
I missed that. Who said that?
Charlie's told me after the call.
Oh,
there it is in just today.
Well, and I wanted to say, right, I wanted to say that about storytelling, but also I realized I didn't address when I was talking before about these productive cycles of failure, as I put in our writing. So oftentimes, because of the current industrial model, failure is punished. If you fail at something, you aren't considered to be, if you fail, if you don't meet a certain standard, right, then you've failed and you need to repeat. And in this model that we're talking about, this cyclical, regenerative, community-based model, failure, meaning not meeting the standard or not meeting the objective, just means that there's more to learn and there's more to explore, and it's a growth point. It's not a evaluation of your ineffectiveness to meet the goal. And so this is a shift, a mental shift, and it's also within our own initiative. So everything that we're talking about here, doing with children, this is also what we practice with ourselves. So you're going into this initiative, you try to create a learning pod, no one shows up. Like, you're like, I spent all this time and energy and it's like, well, okay, I just learned about how to work with myself to get myself to this stage. And now I need to seek out actually where the needs are in my community because I missed it. But it doesn't mean that what you're doing is not good. It just means that you didn't connect with what is seeking you yet. And so you keep on navigating, and this is a story. This is your own story. You're building this story. And so to bring us to the code breaking idea is that we're breaking down the codes that we've been taught. Codes meaning the programming, the conditioning, that there's only one way to do things successfully. And inevitably, when you're creating a system outside of the current model, it will be conflictual. And one of the other things that is outside of the current model is that conflict is actually good. It's growth inducing. It pushes you further and further, further and further into your capacity. And if you look into the natural world, you see like trees that are in conflict with one another, right? It pushes them to seek out light away from each other so they find more capacity. And so that this is something that is natural, it is inherent in our being, and the industrialized model, which is a human created model, is restrictive of that because they don't want the uniqueness. It doesn't serve the model. And so this is a way.
Rockefeller said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. We are going to put these links into the next email so that you can go find out for yourself what's happening behind the curtain. Oz is just a little guy, you know, he had a big voice. It's just a show. Let me tell you a little bit about Simon Esler's work, and we're going to wrap up here and give you some time for questions, Peggy, if you have any. And those of you that are watching our replay, send your questions to us and we'll answer them for you. Simon Esler created a film called Daughters of the West. cut. It's a very thought-provoking film. So I met him and come to some of his workshops. And he is all about this systemic change. And he is part of the bigger movement of unschooling your mind and unschooling your kids. So the unschooling movement, which was brought into focus by John Holt, and John Taylor Gatto writes about the same thing. We don't need school. We never did. You need to get your program to stop running and then get conscious of where it shows up in your daily life and how you set up your expectations, how you meet failure, how you meet conflict. It's all already on the program. And in order to overcome those things and really code break yourself, you have to study it and you have to study yourself. So that becomes a discipline, a devotional activity of unschooling yourself. And if you want to know more about that, you can come to tashafishmans.com and she will guide you through a process of unschooling yourself, because then you can really be effective in unschooling the community around you, because we've all gone through a system of some kind. And if you were so lucky to never have been public schooled and you were an unschooler from the start, you're golden, but doesn't mean that the influences around you, you're immune from them. There's been uptake by proxy. So check out Simon Esler's work. The last thing that he said in the workshop that I attended was, to beat the system, the hyper local community is the answer, because that is where the numbers matter. And that's the greatest counterforce. The more of you under a PMA umbrella, the more of you rallying together with the common ground, the more of you that are able to resolve your own conflicts internally without the justice system, without lawyers, you'll beat the whole system. This is a systemic change that we're looking at. It's not isolated to education. And Alighten Ministries doing a big macro project. This is just one little piece of it that we're working on today for and with you in hyper local community system rebuild. So I want to stop my portion of this here, because Lee is going to loop this into the ancestral wisdom, which is on our link call for the whole month of June. You can jump on to the link call, Lighthouse International Network Key, get the info from us. And we are just launching into ancestral epigenetics, ancestral wisdom, and connection. And then we'll open up for questions.
So basically what we were just talking about, working on your internal ability to play, to do place-based learning and project-based orientation, which the project of your homeschooling pod, your educational initiative, that's your place to play. And the more that you can embody that and connect with that sense of inner joy, and I feel it whenever I've done it. I working with children in this, even today in the showcase, like, it is so enlivening, and it's an experience of connection to our ancestral roots of being able to be in a village and connecting with our communities in this play and place based way. And the projects are just arising from what we see is necessary. And the more that we connect with our community and really resonate on those 3 P's with other people, it is magic. It inevitably will create these sproutings of education that you'd only have to kind of cultivate and work around to make sure that you can make it sustainable and protected. Just like a new sprout would be in a garden. You don't want it overtaken by weeds. You don't want it to be overshadowed by, trees that are long needing to be pruned. Like, there's all kinds of elements to work around, but it's a little project, a little loving, playful experience. And as long as we keep that energy within ourselves, we create these sanctuaries for ourselves, not just the children, because there's a lot of self-sacrifice that comes along when we want to serve the future. We want to be good ancestors for the children of the future. And that can feel very kind of heavy. And even when we know about everything that's happening around, it can feel very deeply solemn. And when we remember that the play is the magic, is the connection to our ancestors, the joyful experience of being alive and in connection with others, and we take that forward, that's where the lighthouse of our spirit is allowed to connect with others. And that's the difference. That's the difference between the industrialized model and what we're talking about. And so with
All right.
that,
With that, there's hopefully some questions that are coming for you, Peggy, and anyone else who wants to know more about what we're working with. Let's hear from you.
I very much appreciate your presentation. All three of you had important pieces to add to having a path be unveiled in front. The enthusiasm in all three of you is felt, palpable, appreciated, and your past. I'm really confident and comfortable going into uncharted territory. I'm good with all of it. I've taught for over 40 years in so many different settings that I'm comfortable finding out how to land on fours when we're all upside down together. That doesn't daunt me. I love all of that. And I love that you love that. And you guys gave so many beautiful segues of open thought communication that made me go, ooh, that's new. Oh, I want to do it that way. Oh, I want to try that. So I've always been play-based, which is really comfortable. And I think that's why I still love it after 44 years. I still love going to work. And I think it's because there's room for me all the time. Even if I'm exhausted, there is the self, I don't know if it's sacrifice or vulnerability that makes it so much delicious fun to go be, I guess, our core selves all the day and ask for that and not care that somebody else can't do it. Just be out there because it feels good to be there. It feels way better than covering up. So anyway, I loved all three of you not covering up today. You all shared yourselves deeply and beautifully, and it's very inspiring. I have two questions that are really don't touch the quality that you brought. So I'm mostly clapping for the quality that you brought and asking two very mundane questions, but maybe your answer will be inspirational as well. When doing a PEA, PMA, or a ministry governed by a ministry and having it hold together, how does that touch, and this might be an Amber question, how does that touch how the city looks at, for example, a business license, or how does insurance work? And I know these were questions I walked in with as a, oh, I need to know this, and it did not come from what you shared today. I don't really have any questions about what you shared today. They're more ponders, and I will go follow the additions that I jotted down so I can go on more self-discovery with them. So I'm not giving you back the quality that you just gave me. Mine's really kind of like ground level questions, but if somebody can talk about, creating that original charter and knowing how insurance, for example, so that I respect the space that I would be renting, then we have an agreement that I would assume is based on insurance, but that goes back to the model that we're not talking about. And it's landed in a city that I just got a request for paying my city business license fees today. And that goes back to the model that makes you kind of want to throw up. So anyway, there you go. There's my question, the practical parts of this stage for me.
That is a great question. And we've attended several events like this that are hosted by people with enthusiasm and excitement, and they were unable to fulfill that question being answered. So we all got ready because we knew it was coming, and Amber's going to take on that one.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne.
Yes, you want to know how the city views a private education association that's within a ministry, is that correct?
I want to navigate, do I need insurance, and do I need to create a business license in the city where it will be held? Or if those get handled by being under the protection of a PMA?
Yeah, we do not get local business licenses. We don't consider it a business. We consider it an unincorporated entity. So it's a little different And as under the ministry, we have our rights, correct? And they're not relying on state statutes. So we're removing ourselves from that jurisdiction. And in terms of insurance, that is by choice and that is by contract with insurance companies, and some do cover and some do want to inquire and are a little more have a harder time understanding the PMA structure, and some are more privy to that. Trying to think, I haven't gotten it, but there was a conversation with another advisor who had mentioned she had a list of insurance companies that and there are education associations that do get insurance, and they also have their parents sign a waiver too. So it's all of it goes hand in hand. Suzanne has some really good firsthand experience of why that is important too, and having that governance structure is a set up. So if a child does get injured in the education association or in the education, whatever it is, whatever type of school it is, that they have a plan for how to handle that.
Yeah. Yes, I also have experience with going into a bank and also a credit union, not always a credit union. They don't always accept what was in Canada. I set up one called, and it was under the unincorporated informal structure. That was what our bank account was called. It wasn't a business, but we were able to cash checks that were made out to the name of our unincorporated informal structure. And we also were able to get insurance through the farm that we were on. They just got a rider onto theirs because they had people coming onto the property all the time. And then during the parent meetings, when we went through the handbook in great detail and every page was signed by the parents, that if someone decided to sue us, which they fortunately didn't, but this has happened, Homeschool Legal Defense Association can also help you get some of this information in case you do have to deal with outside jurisdiction, which is the legal system. But generally, if you find yourself before a judge because the child in your care fell out of a tree and broke their arm or cracked their tooth or whatever it was that happened, or even died, you will be presenting your governance documents and your bylaws and handbook of how you have all agreed under your PMA to operate and interface with each other. There'd be a conflict resolution plan, a grievance address process for anything that comes up in conflict. And you have to stay within the guidelines of those agreements. And if you go outside of them and then enlist the help of the government systems, then the judges and lawyers will be looking at your governing documents as the basis for their decision making, whether you are compliant to your own laws or not. And so that has been within my scope of experience successful. And I think that it's pretty easy to get insurance if you cover all your bases, especially if you're with a host site. And if you're dealing with a commercial property, then you'll have to go down a few rabbit holes and find those agents that will supply you with the insurance coverage that you need. But it is possible to get it, yes.
Great answer. That was great. Thank you so much for, I tried to write as fast as you spoke, packed a lot in there. Awesome.
Well, for you, Peggy, and for everyone else who's watching this, well, for you particularly, you will get a copy of this Playshop.
Oh, great.
And then, yeah. And also, everybody who's watching, as a gift for watching, we're offering our Threshold Playbook that we created. It's, I think, 48 pages of all kinds of things that we have just been talking about, and a lot more too. So, and then some templates to use. And so we have lots of different things that you can expand on from this chat. And we will also be sending in that email along with that the PDF for that, the information about our next play shop, which is on June 14th at 5. And we also will send you the links to the references that we gave during this webinar. So it's good that you were taking notes. That's very great, but you'll also get it all again.
Yes, and I want to put a little bit more padding around the backbone of the course content in our full course, which is coming up. We're launching the auditor's course soon. That's what this is info for. The next meeting we have is going to go a little bit further in to different topics. That's the same stuff we talked about today, but on another lens, another facet of that. And within the course, we go through all the processes and all the scenarios in the workshop format for the governance part, step 3. So you would be able to actually practice in real time some of these scenarios and open those questions up a little bit bigger. So that's all there for you in the future over there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And you brought up the how one gets paid or how money moves through. And that was a question that would be my third one, and you answered it. So beautiful. You read my mind. It's
Oh,
part
well,
of
we're going to do more on that on the Friday call too. The economic system and how we can move. What you're doing now can affect a lot of change on different levels. So we're going to keep going. And I will close our call with another of my favorite verses, which we use in the faculty or the mentorship group. It's just very simple, and I hope you take it to heart. From Rudolf Steiner. Imbue thyself with the power of imagination. Have courage for the truth. Sharpen thy feeling for responsibility of soul. Thanks for joining us, Peggy, and thanks to everyone watching. We'll see you in a few days, 2 days, 3 days on the 14th.
Yay. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.